Imagine living half your life as a man and half as a woman. Not in secret, but publicly, with the entire world watching and debating which you really were. Imagine being a decorated military officer, a skilled diplomat, a celebrated swordsman, and then, at age 49, declaring that you were actually a woman who had been living as a man for decades. This wasn't fiction. This was the life of the Chevalier d'Eon, one of the most remarkable and controversial figures of the 18th century. Charles-Geneviève Louis Auguste. André Timothée d'Eon de Beaumont was born in 1728 in Burgundy, France. For the first half of their life, d'Eon lived as a man, a soldier, a spy, a diplomat, who negotiated crucial treaties for France. For the second half, d'Eon lived as a woman, Madame d'Eon, a celebrity fencer who fought exhibition matches across Europe. But here's what makes the story truly extraordinary. Throughout their entire life, even d'Eon's closest associates were never completely certain of their biological sex. The mystery became so famous that London bookmakers took bets on it. When d'Eon died in 1810, the post-mortem examination shocked everyone, but we'll get to that. Was the Chevalier d'Eon a woman forced to live as a man to pursue a career? A man who later chose to live as a woman? Someone who defied the rigid gender categories of their time? A master spy using gender ambiguity as cover? Or simply someone who was, in their own words, living authentically in whatever form felt right? This is the true story of the Chevalier d'Eon, spy, soldier, diplomat, and a person who challenged everything 18th century Europe thought it knew about gender. Charles d'Eon was born on October 5, 1728, in Tonnerre, Burgundy, to an aristocratic but not particularly wealthy family. Historical records are clear about the birth. d'Eon was recorded as male, baptized as a boy, and raised as a son. From early childhood, d'Eon was exceptional. Small in stature with delicate features, d'Eon excelled in academics, studying law at the Collège Mazarin in Paris. But it wasn't just intellectual pursuits. d'Eon also trained in fencing, becoming an extraordinarily skilled swordsman despite their small frame. At age 25, d'Eon entered the service of King Louis XIV's secret diplomatic network, known as the Secret du Roi, a parallel foreign policy operation that sometimes worked at cross purposes with France's official diplomacy. This is where the legends begin to blur with documented fact. According to some accounts, including d'Eon's own later claims, the young diplomat was sent to Russia in 1755, disguised as a woman, Mademoiselle Léa de Beaumont, to infiltrate the court of Empress Elizabeth and gather intelligence. The story goes that only a woman could gain the intimate access needed to the Empress, and d'Eon's feminine features made the disguise convincing. Is this true? Historians debate it. No contemporary Russian records mention a Mademoiselle Léa de Beaumont at court, but d'Eon definitely went to Russia, definitely gained unusual access to the Empress, and definitely helped negotiate a crucial Franco-Russian alliance. Whether this involved cross-dressing or not remains uncertain, but the legend was born. What is certain is that d'Eon served with distinction as a dragoon officer in the 7 Years' War, 1756-1763, earning the prestigious Cross of St. Louis for bravery in combat. This was no ceremonial position. d'Eon fought in actual battles, led troops, and was recognized as a courageous officer. In 1762, d'Eon was sent to London as secretary to the French ambassador, tasked with secretly negotiating the Treaty of Paris to end the 7 Years' War. d'Eon's diplomatic skills were so valued that after the ambassador left, d'Eon essentially ran the embassy, becoming interim minister plenipotentiary, an extraordinary position of trust and responsibility. By 1763, at age 35, the Chevalier d'Eon had served as a spy, a soldier, and a diplomat at the highest levels. There was every reason to expect a glittering career ahead in the masculine world of 18th century politics and warfare. Instead, everything was about to change. D'Eon's downfall began with a dispute over money and honor. As minister in London, d'Eon had access to secret correspondence and documents related to Louis XV's Secret du Roi. When a new French ambassador arrived and tried to assert authority, d'Eon refused to surrender certain sensitive documents without direct orders from the king. The situation escalated into a full diplomatic scandal. D'Eon publicly accused the new ambassador of incompetence and dishonesty. The ambassador demanded d'Eon's recall and arrest. D'Eon, fearing imprisonment in the Bastille, refused to return to France and essentially went into exile in London, still in possession of highly sensitive state secrets. This created an impossible situation for Louis XV. D'Eon knew too much to be left free, but was too dangerous to arrest forcibly on foreign soil. Any attempt might lead d'Eon to publish the secret documents, exposing France's covert diplomacy to the world. So began years of negotiations, with the French government trying to get d'Eon to return the documents, and d'Eon using them as leverage to demand a pension, reinstatement of honor, and guarantees of safety. During this standoff, living in London in increasing poverty, d'Eon began making the first claims that would transform their life. In 1770, rumors began circulating in London that the Chevalier d'Eon was actually a woman who had been raised and lived as a man to pursue a military and diplomatic career unavailable to women. Where did these rumors originate? From d'Eon themselves in carefully planted hints and suggestions to sympathetic journalists and society figures. The rumors became such a sensation that London bookmakers began taking bets on d'Eon's true sex. Thousands of pounds were wagered. Some bettors tried to have d'Eon physically examined to settle the wagers, leading to farcical legal cases where d'Eon successfully argued that such an examination would be an intolerable violation of personal dignity. But why would d'Eon start these rumors? Multiple theories exist. Theory 1. d'Eon had always felt female and saw this as an opportunity to live authentically while still in public life. Theory 2. It was a brilliant strategic move. If d'Eon was revealed to be a woman, it would be such a scandal for France that the government would have to settle favorably to keep d'Eon silent. Theory 3. d'Eon was losing relevance and saw the gender controversy as a way to remain important and interesting to potential patrons. Theory 4. Some combination of all these, strategic advantage meeting personal truth. In 1775, the French government sent playwright Beaumont, later famous for The Barber of Seville, to negotiate with d'Eon. After months of talks, an extraordinary agreement was reached. d'Eon would return the secret documents, France would pay d'Eon's debts, and provide a generous pension. d'Eon could return to France. But, and here's the unprecedented condition, d'Eon must publicly acknowledge being a woman and must dress as a woman for the rest of their life. This last condition came directly from King Louis XVI, who had succeeded his grandfather Louis XV in 1774. Why would the king demand this? Perhaps to humiliate a troublesome former agent. Perhaps because Louis XVI genuinely believed d'Eon was a woman and wanted her to live honestly. Perhaps because making d'Eon live as a woman would neutralize them. A woman couldn't hold military or diplomatic positions, couldn't be taken seriously in the masculine world of politics. Whatever the reason, in 1777, at age 49, d'Eon signed the agreement. The Chevalier d'Eon became Madame d'Eon and returned to France dressed in women's clothing. The transformation was immediate and total. d'Eon adopted women's clothing, used feminine pronouns, and was officially recognized as a woman by the French government. Society papers across Europe carried the sensational news. The famous soldier diplomat was actually a woman who had been forced to live as a man. d'Eon embraced this new identity publicly. In their own accounts, Dayon claimed to have been born female, raised as a boy by parents who needed a male heir for inheritance purposes, and forced to maintain the masculine disguise through their career. Whether this was true or a convenient narrative, Dayon stuck to it consistently for the remaining 33 years of life. But here's what's remarkable. Dayon didn't become a quiet, retiring lady as 18th century society might have expected. Instead, Madame Dayon became one of the most famous women in Europe as a fencer. Dayon's skills with a sword, honed during military service, didn't disappear with the change to women's clothing. Dayon began giving fencing exhibitions across France and England, fighting against male opponents in formal matches attended by thousands. These weren't theatrical performances. They were real fencing matches, and Dayon frequently won. Imagine the spectacle, a woman in elegant dress fighting with masculine skill against celebrated swordsmen. In an age when women were supposed to be delicate and passive, Dayon was proof that feminine presentation and martial skill could coexist. The performances were sensational entertainment, and Dayon became a celebrity, earning significant income from these exhibitions. Dayon also wrote extensively during this period. Their autobiography, published in multiple volumes, mixed truth with strategic fiction, but provided fascinating insights into life living between genders. Dayon corresponded with philosophers, nobles, and scholars across Europe, always maintaining that they were simply a woman who had been forced by circumstances to live as a man earlier in life. When the French Revolution erupted in 1789, Dayon tried to return to military service, offering to lead a regiment of women soldiers to fight for France. The revolutionary government declined this offer, perhaps unsurprisingly. Dayon spent the final years in London, living in modest circumstances with a female companion, Marie Cole, who became Dayon's closest friend and caretaker. They lived together in a domestic partnership that defied easy categorization. Were they friends, partners, companions? Dayon never married and left no known romantic relationships of any kind throughout their entire life. In May 1810, at age 81, Dayon died peacefully in London, and then came the moment that everyone had been speculating about for 40 years, the post-mortem examination. When Dayon's body was examined after death, the doctors made a startling discovery. Dayon had been anatomically male. The physician's report was clear and detailed. Dayon possessed male anatomy, though noted as of feminine form in build and features. The revelation shocked London society. For decades, Dayon had been accepted and treated as a woman. The bookmaker bets had mostly favored woman. Society had embraced Madame Dayon as proof that women could be as skilled and brave as men. Now they learned that the biological sex was male. But here's what's fascinating from a modern perspective. This revelation didn't actually answer the question, who was Dayon? It answered a question about anatomy, but anatomy and identity are not the same thing. Consider the complexity. Dayon lived 49 years as a man and 33 years as a woman. Dayon claimed to have always been a woman forced to live as a man. Dayon showed no interest in returning to masculine dress, even when it might have been advantageous. Dayon seemed comfortable and perhaps even relieved to live as a woman, yet Dayon was anatomically male. What does this mean? Historical interpretations vary wildly. 18th-19th century view. Dayon was a man who dressed as a woman for unclear reasons, perhaps mental illness, perhaps strategic advantage, perhaps moral degeneracy. Early to mid-20th century view, Dayon was a transvestite or cross-dresser, someone with a psychological compulsion to wear clothing of the opposite sex. Late 20th century view, Dayon was likely what we would now call transgender, someone assigned male at birth who identified as female, or at least felt more comfortable living as a woman. 21st century queer, trans scholarship view. Dayon might be best understood as non-binary or gender fluid, someone who didn't fit neatly into either male or female categories and who lived at different times as both, perhaps finding truth in both identities. Alternative view. Dayon was a man who found living as a woman advantageous or interesting, and who performed femininity skillfully without necessarily identifying as female internally. The truth is, we can never know Dayon's internal sense of self. We don't have the language from Dayon's own time that would allow such nuanced expression. We have Dayon's actions and words, but those words were shaped by the limited vocabulary and concepts available in the 18th century. What we can say is this: Dayon lived a life that challenged every assumption of 18th century society about gender. In an age of rigid categories, Dayon demonstrated that gender could be fluid, performative, strategic, and deeply personal all at once. Why does the Chevalier Dayon matter today, over 200 years after their death? For LGBTQ plus history, Dayon is one of the earliest well-documented examples of someone living openly across gender boundaries in European history. While Dayon wasn't the only person to do so, the detailed records, widespread publicity, and Dayon's own extensive writings make this case uniquely valuable for understanding historical gender variance. Dayon has been claimed by various communities as an early transgender figure, as a cross-dresser, as intersex, though the medical evidence doesn't support this, as non-binary before that terminology existed. Whatever modern label we might apply, Dayon demonstrated that people have been living outside binary gender norms for centuries. For women's history, regardless of Dayon's biological sex or internal identity, the fact remains that as Madame Dayon, they provided powerful evidence that women could excel in traditionally masculine fields. Dayon's fencing skills, military knowledge, and diplomatic expertise didn't disappear when wearing a dress. This challenged 18th century assumptions about innate female incapacity. For understanding gender, Dayon's life illustrates how much gender is about social performance, perception, and context rather than simple biology. Dayon was accepted as male when presenting as male, accepted as female when presenting as female, and throughout remained the same person with the same skills and intelligence. For espionage history, Dayon was one of the most successful spies of the 18th century, whether or not the Mademoiselle Léa de Beaumont story was true. Dayon's career in the Secret du Roi reveals the sophisticated intelligence operations of pre-revolutionary France. For understanding historical evidence, Dayon's case teaches us to be cautious about assuming we can fully understand historical figures, especially regarding aspects of identity that the past lacked vocabulary to discuss clearly. We must resist the urge to force Dayon into modern categories while also recognizing genuine historical parallels to modern experiences. The Chevalier Dayon lived an extraordinary life by any measure. A decorated soldier, a skilled diplomat who helped shape European alliances, a celebrity fencer, and a person who captured the imagination of 2 centuries through the mystery of gender. Was Dayon a woman forced to live as a man who chose to live as a woman, someone who was both, neither, or something else entirely? The answer depends partly on what evidence you prioritize: anatomy, self-identification, social acceptance, or lived experience, and partly on what framework you use to understand gender itself. Perhaps the most honest answer is simply this: Dayon was Dayon, a unique individual who lived authentically in ways that made sense to them, even when those ways confused and fascinated everyone around them. In an age that demanded people fit into rigid boxes labeled man or woman, Dayon refused to stay in either box for very long. In doing so, Dayon carved out space for ambiguity, complexity, and personal truth that resonates today. The story reminds us that gender variance isn't new, isn't modern, isn't a recent trend. People have been living outside binary gender norms throughout history. Most left no records. Dayon left extensive records. Letters, books, government documents, newspaper accounts that allow us to witness one person's navigation of gender across a lifetime. Whatever we conclude about Dayon's identity, one thing is certain. This was someone who lived boldly, unapologetically, and on their own terms in a world that demanded conformity. That alone makes the Chevalier Dayon's story worth remembering, celebrating, and learning from. Thank you for joining us on this journey into one of history's most fascinating lives. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe and share this video. The Chevalier Dayon's story raises important questions about gender, identity, and how we understand historical figures who don't fit neat categories. What do you think? How would you describe Dayon's identity? Share your thoughts respectfully in the comments. Until next time, remember, history is full of people who defied expectations and lived authentic lives, even when the world didn't have words for who they were.